I would like to say tonight I've actually been fortunate enough to meet Kay in Phoenix. She's from Phoenix, Arizona. I do some time there in the winter, not in jail, but in good weather typically. Kay is a remarkable person, and we're going to get into some of her skills and different things. But her background is scientific. She's an intuitive. She's a remote viewer, spiritual, and an artistic person that also is a minister, which I just found out tonight that she is. Kay, we thank you for coming and being our guest tonight, and we welcome you to our community.
Thank you, Mark. And I want to thank Mitzi and Betty and Laura and all of you who are kind enough to take out time to join us. Everybody's time is the most valuable commodity that you could have. And so to think that you would take time to be with us is an honor. I greatly appreciate being here.
That's great. Kay, can we start just with you just telling us about yourself? You can provide as much information as you like, and as we go along, we'll fill in with some of the other issues that we want to get to Dr. Knight.
Well, thank you. I'm someone who has, from the time I can remember, been interested in beyond the typical things that one would find in the world. I was born and raised here in Phoenix, Arizona, and was fortunate enough to come into a family where being psychic was a normal thing. My grandmother, with whom I lived, as well as my grandfather, my mother, and my father, we all lived together. I'm the only child and only grandchild. My grandmother was a psychic. She was also a nurse. And if she were still alive, she'd be doing exactly what I'm doing today in her work. And so from the time I was really little, she taught me how she was taught by her mother, who came from Ireland. And she was taught that I had what was called the second sight. And because of that, this was just inheritance from our family, just normal as can be. Grandmother was a spiritualist as well as a good Catholic. So I was not raised in the Catholic Church, but in the Methodist Church, but also in the spiritualist church. So from the time I was little, was taken to seances, and I read and read and read as much as I could. Even in grade school, I was trying to do out-of-body experiences. Didn't succeed in grade school. It's a good thing. As a young child, is working on my own. But I always knew that I wanted to be a parapsychologist or something like that. In grade school, my friends, most of my friends wanted to be teachers or nurses or something like that, and I wanted to be a scientist priestess. Well, that's what I am, a scientist priestess. And so I knew I wanted to go into some form of science. I wasn't sure which. And since I don't have any mathematical ability or very little mathematical ability, physics and astronomy and those kind of typical things were out immediately. But I decided on biology. So I became a biologist and continued my studies into parapsychology, all of every bit I could learn about intuitive development all my life. And of course, the ministry, after I had a series of healings through prayer, and eventually just put it all together. I got my master's and doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley in biology, studying muscle and nerve interaction during metamorphosis of a moth. So I'm technically an entomologist. But I also have done artwork from the time I was little. So I'm a scientific illustrator and taught biology, taught all kinds of classes at Arizona State University and various other universities in our area, do cell biology, natural history of Arizona, ecology and conservation, all of those kind of outer subjects, as well as privately I taught metaphysics, including ancient scriptures and ancient histories of different comparative religions. And then I taught art, different forms of art. And of course, developed my ministry primarily in the area of prayer and in the area of healing through prayer. So at this time, I'm very pleased to let you know that I work, and have for many, many years full time as a medical intuitive and intuitive consultant, and also as a scientific and technical intuitive, where I work with a team of other scientists to invent things and look into the very nature of reality. And I continue my ministry in prayer with a prayer group that was started over 40 years ago and is now an online prayer group working with healing and prayer. That's about
Good.
it in a nutshell. I'm a mother, grandmother, great grandmother.
Wow,
The latest great grandchild was born on December 31st. Little
beautiful.
baby Alice was born December 31st and got in under the line for the taxes so that her parents got to get tax deduction. So she's our latest addition.
That's fantastic. I'm lucky enough to have five grandchildren and one more on the way. So I love them, and it's such a change in life to have grandchildren. I love it.
Yeah, well, these are greats. These are
Yes. Well,
greats. So that's
you're way ahead of us.
grandchildren and greats.
Yes. So you're speaking about the scientific community and the world that you live in and
Yeah.
the wonders of science. And
Yes.
we always understood them to be mathematical or straightforward, or plus one always equals two, and all these things. And then you get into metaphysics and different issues that seem to be the woo-woo realm. How is science dealing with that these days, that from your point of view?
Let me just say that from my point of view, I don't believe anything is woo-woo in that sense of being extraordinary, because as a person who is an experiencer, I experience these effects. I know what I see. I know what I know, and I go about it in a scientific manner, of testing and double testing and triple testing. I strongly believe in that. Um, Let me just explain just a tad about my view of physics, because that's going to help us, I think, to put the other into, and this will be very quick, I promise, not real fast, not real excruciating. However, many years ago, I was doing a dream interpretation class. This was in the early 1980s here in Phoenix, and a couple of gentlemen were there who I didn't know, among other people. And afterwards, they stayed and talked to me for about an hour in the parking lot. Come to find out, they were university professors, and they were fascinated with my work and my perspective. And one of them chose to continue connection with me, and he and I were talking over lunch one day, and a friend of mine who was also a client wanted me to go up to Sedona. You've all heard of Sedona, Arizona. Wanted me to go to Sedona to do a bunch of readings, several readings for people up there. And he happened to be a professional hypnotist. And I said, "Oh, that'd be great. I'll go up, I'll do readings up in Sedona. It'll be super." And I said, "And by the way, would you mind hypnotizing me?" Because I had read over my many years of study, and I had tried to do self hypnosis, hadn't really worked when I was a child. So I said, "Would you please hypnotize me and put me under, and then we'll see if this helps my readings?" And he said, "Sure, I'd be glad to do that." And so I told this to my scientific acquaintance, and he said, "Oh, great. Ask him to ask you while you are under if we've ever worked together before." I said, "Okay, sure, we'll do that." So I told the hypnotist. The hypnotist put me under, and I went way under. And while I was in this deep, deep relaxation and deeper in a trance than I had ever been before because of the hypnosis, he asked me the question. This gentleman's name was Dave Crinsley, Professor Dave Crinsley. And he said, "Have you ever worked with Dave before?" And all of a sudden, I could hear this coming. I wasn't channeling any entity or anything. It was me, but I was talking about how Dave and I had worked together in Atlantis and how we had worked at creating crystals, quartz crystals from salt water. And I went on and on and on about this. It was all being taped. And then afterwards, when I came up and I got awake and I had the tape in my hand and I thought, well, I'm going to give this to Dave, but I'll probably never see him again because this is just too much. This is way over because it was detailed stuff about how to do this. Well, I gave it to Dave, not really knowing too much, about his background of what he was. I knew he was a professor, full professor, and all this, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I heard from him in about a week, and he said that he had a friend, his other friend, that wanted to talk to me. And come to find out, the process that I had described was one that they had been working on for a long time. And come to find out, Dave was one of the world's experts in quartz. And and he was professor of geology and was like, wow, okay, that's kind of cool. And that started the adventure, which I've still been on, continuing to this day, of meeting with my scientific colleagues. And they would put me, I, of course, continued to study with this hypnotist and then learned how to do self-hypnosis. And then it would put me into deep altered state and much deeper than I go in my usual readings with people. And then they would ask me anything they wanted about the, the world in general. And so one of the first things that came through, and all this was recorded and transcribed, thousands and thousands of pages and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions, if you can imagine, since the 80s, 1980s, was that everything in the world, all matter comes into formation as matter, and then it becomes pure, undifferentiated energy. And then it is focused again into matter. And then it returns to pure, unfocused energy billions of times per second. So it's blinking. Everything is blinking on and off, on and off, on and off. And there's a rate for this that is consistent within everything in the third dimension and our dimension. It's all blinking at the same rate. But there are other dimensions that are blinking in between. So we have I've seen up to about 12 interpenetrating dimensions that when we are solid, they're not, but then we're slightly off in the blinking cycle. So it's just everything is blinking, 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 coming in and out. So because of this, I've, over and over and over, we've talked about many, many, many things pertinent to this. And you can read a bit more of it in my book, Inner Visions of Matter and Subtle Energy, which is available. But at any rate, the crux of the matter is nothing is as it seems. Nothing is solid. Nothing is permanent. Everything is changing. And because of this, when things are perfectly solid, of course they're separate. When in the corporeal state, my physical brain, of course, is my physical brain. And Mitzi's physical brain is her physical brain. And she and I are separate but when we're in the pure, undifferentiated energy portion of our existence, we're all one, my friends. And Mitzi and I are the same, and Betty and Mark and each and every one of you, we're all commingled. We're all the same. And then we recrystallize into our own thing. And I see our consciousness as being with the physical brain, which is the physical part, and then what I call the mind field, which is the extended consciousness that each of us possesses. And so in these paranormal phenomena, I think are perfectly normal. I think we can drop the para part of it and we can stop calling them woo-woo. These are normal things. And all they are is allowing ourselves to extend our physical senses. And the training I have done since I was little, knee-high to a grasshopper, so to speak, with my grandmother, had to do with bringing that consciousness into the physical brain that was gathered in the complete consciousness. And that includes spirit, discarnates. It includes extraterrestrials that are in other dimensions and in this dimension, and other people and animals and everything else. So once we understand that we live in a quantum universe, these phenomena that we are talking about, that you and I are considering, are absolutely normal. These are part of extended senses. And the work that I do as an intuitive, um, I am allowing myself to blend my energies with the permission of the other person or the target, to blend my energies with that other individual. And to the extent that I am capable of opening to bringing those impressions through, then I can interpret what it is that I perceive. And it takes practice, but one can also work on this for yourself. And I believe that everybody here in this group can work at sensing yourself, sensing your body, sensing your energy field much more in, shall we say, in a much more balanced way, so that you can become aware of your own physical issues and emotional ones, and at all levels. So I'm going to hesitate for a moment and take a deep breath and let you guys talk about what you want to talk about, and then we can move on from here.
That's a fascinating start to our discussion. It leads to so many topics. For instance, manifestation, your thoughts, your prayers. Are these all connected to this subconscious, deep subconscious? And that's why manifestation, I believe, is very real and it's part of our reality. And if you think negatively, probably draw negativity towards you. If you think positively, positive issues take place with you. What
Well,
what what do
I
you
I very much concur with what Edgar Cayce said. Most of you, I think, or I hope all of you know who Edgar Cayce was. He said, thoughts are things. And I want you to take that seriously. When I was little, often I would hear at school and other things, doesn't matter what you think. What you think is your own business. You can think whatever. And I'm here to say that's not true. It's not true. What you think affects everyone else on the planet and beyond, because the physical brain, yes, that's confined within your skull, and if you speak of it, then you share it that way. But in the pure energy aspect of it, you are either polluting the universe or you're helping to heal it through your thoughts. And your own physical body is affected. The chemistry of your body is affected, like I like to do in my classes, or when I used to teach intuition years ago, is I'd like you all to imagine that I'm handing you a lemon, a beautiful, lovely, juicy lemon, and I want you to take it and imagine you can smell it, and take a knife and cut it and just drip some of that lemon juice on your tongue. And if you do that with enough imagination, guess what? You'll start to salivate. Your saliva glands will be activated. That's the effect of thought on the physical body. And so if you allow garbage in, you get garbage out. If you spend your time just watching things on television or the YouTube or wherever that are frightening, sure, it gets to be addictive sometimes, and it is an addiction, but it's not helpful. It's hurtful. We really need to manifest, in my opinion, joy and beauty and love and graciousness in order to have that more in the world.
couldn't agree with you more. Okay, it's beautiful. Um, so when we start thinking of that connection on how we all have a tremendous effect on our really our oneness, right? We're all one. So the idea of had taught me some time ago about the idea that we all are one. So what you do to somebody else, you're actually doing to yourself. So he brought you to a different plane of thought, and how to act, and maybe some, be more reasonable people and caring and empathetic, that type of thing. So yeah, that's a beautiful way to sort of lead into this issue. Our group, a lot of people have had ET UFO experiences as well. So I want to take a step back. You talked about blinking and the billions of times a second that we would blink through that, whatever that
It's called
transition.
I call it the etheric template, and it happens to be the interface. Don't think of it as a tissue or anything. It's not a physical thing, but it's an interface
Yes.
between matter and pure, undifferentiated energy. And there is something, and this is what I'd like you to ponder upon. Think about this. There's something, for instance, the next time you go to dinner and you look at your table and you see a shaker of salt there, when you decide to put it on your food, and I don't suggest that you do, but if you decide to use it, you're going to presume it's sodium chloride, that it's salt, that it's not something else. Well, how come if we're blinking billions of times per second since the Big Bang, how come sodium's still sodium and chloride is still chloride? There has to be an organizational principle, guys. And anybody who tells you there is not is just not thinking clearly, because Betty's Betty, and we recognize Betty from day to day to day, and all of her molecules are coming back and forth, and her personality, and she's Betty. It doesn't disintegrate into chaos. There is something more. I call that the mind of God, even though I don't personify it in the sense of an image of a person on a cloud with a harp. It's an unknowable, unimaginable principle
Excuse
of
me,
organization.
excuse me, Kay.
Yes. Hi,
Have you,
Meryl.
hi, have you ever read Love Sang Rampa?
I believe so.
Excellent. Just what you're talking about. You Forever by Love Sang Rampa. And he also wrote The Third Eye.
Yes. See, this is not new to me. I'm not telling you something that's new, nor should it be new to you. I'm
No, I
just saying,
read this in the
yeah,
70s. I mean, it was
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah. So all I'm saying is that there's this etheric template, all matter pops through it and forms, but there's something that's keeping it popping through in the same organization. And that's what's the great cosmic mystery.
Just so in the future, just if you want to speak, put it in the chat that you want to ask a question, because sometimes we could be involved with a heavy conversation and in a train of thought, and we could get directed off the topic, and we sometimes never come back to it. So if you want to ask a question, put it in the chat, and we'll get to it, and we'll get that question. No disrespect intended. I'm just trying to stay on topic here, because we're going to have lots of things to talk about, and there's going to be lots of time for questions as well.
Thank you, Meryl, for doing that, for your question. But thank you, Mark. At any rate, so anyway, without going into the minutia of how matter is organized, I just want to say that this allows us to have extended sensory perception, and that allows us to people such as Mitzi and Betty and all of us and all of you who are here to use our extended senses if we practice it, if we try, if we reinforce it, but also have critical thinking. Please, please, please think critically about what's happening so that you use the scientific method on it. Years ago, when I was really sharpening my skills as a medical intuitive, I worked with my own physician. This was again back in the 80s and early 90s. I worked with my own physician, and he gave me just numbers, patient numbers. I never knew the names, never knew anything about those people. And while I was in a deep altered state with my scientific team, every now and then they, in between talking about this and the other, they'd throw me a number or two. Say, okay, tell us about patient what, this number. And then I would go in and I'd view that individual, and I would give them the information. And then it was all written down and sent back to the physician, who was never in the room, never present when we did, and graded. We did this about 100 cases over several months so that I could get some idea, again, feedback about at the scientific level of this. Now with my work with individuals, I usually just work with a photo of the person, A person doesn't need to tell me anything at all. I don't necessarily want to know anything about them. Mark, did you tell me anything at all about you before we had a session? No.
No.
And I did one with Grant, and he put that on his thing. And sometimes I never hear back from the person. Like from Grant, after I did that reading with him, it was months before all of a sudden I started getting these calls from people who wanted to do readings with me, and I discovered he'd put the whole reading up on the YouTube. He never got back to me about it, and I thought, well, you know, I'll never hear from him again, just like with Dave. But also, there's some fascinating things that happen. I wonder if anybody here has ever had psychokinesis happen with them. Psychokinesis has to do with matter disappearing or being affected by thought, because we're talking about thought, and thoughts are things. Occasionally, things will disappear or reappear. Just all depends. And I'm sure Mitzi has had that happen, and Betty and others. You know, people don't talk about it in our culture that much. Well, I told Dave Quinsley about it years ago. You know, he was my scientific pal. And again, we were having lunch one day. He was laughing and poo-pooing about that. As like, this is ridiculous, Kate. This doesn't happen. Well, we were sitting in broad daylight in this little restaurant at the community college where I was teaching, and there was a bag of nachos, which are a kind of chips, on the table. In plain view, they disappeared. We never did find the bag of nachos. And for years, the whole bag, not just a few, but the whole bag disappeared. For years afterward, I say, Dave, remember the nachos? Because we've been talking about PK and things disappearing and reappearing. Anyway, it's just one of those things. There are many phenomena that most people just gloss over in their lives and they don't give any credence to. And one of them is the ET presence. All my life, I've been interested in extraterrestrials and have believed always, forever, that they are here. And in fact, I used to go outside in the dark here in Phoenix and look up and say, "Hey, take me! Here I am." They wouldn't. They didn't. But I have always been fascinated by them, and I was a field investigator starting from 1970, and then in about 2012, I became a field investigator again. First, I was a field investigator for APRO, an organization that's no longer in existence, and then for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network.
Okay, I got an interesting connection to that, what you just said. And it's funny, I'm where I'm sitting right now. So I'm in my house right now, and I'll explain the circumstances right now. And by the way, Kay doesn't do personal readings or anything else, but I'm going to explain something that may fit into the world you just talked about. So out here,
I do personal readings personally, but not in a group setting like this.
Not on these settings, right?
Yeah.
So I was sitting, I was downstairs reading a book, and I've let some of the people know in our group that I'm just sitting. We have a walkout basement, glass wall overlooking the river, and it was nighttime. All of a sudden a light started coming in the room, and I looked out towards the river, and there was a giant ball of light. It was like gasoline on water. It was churning, and it was an orb. So my wife was upstairs, and I started yelling at her from downstairs. I ran up the stairs, and I was yelling at her what was going on in the back. By the time I got around, she was already standing out there on the edge of the deck, looking at this, what I saw as a giant orb. And I was going, wow, look at that thing. And I stood there for maybe 20, 30 seconds watching it with her. And we're both going, wow, what is that? I mean, that's amazing. I've had several seeing different craft and different issues, but so anyways, I said, I'm going to run in the house and get a camera. I want to take a picture of it with my phone. So I run in the house, come back 10 seconds later. She says it disappeared right in front of her. So 2 years later, because I run this group, people sometimes stop me and say, hey, I understand you've seen UFOs. And when I was 16, I was driving, and they start describing their situation. And they say, well, what kind of experiences have you had? So my wife was with me at this event. And I was describing this thing where my wife and I saw this orb out the back, and I started describing it. And she looked at me and said, it wasn't an orb, it was a metallic craft. And we were standing 75, 80 feet away from this object, side by side, and saw two different things, which to me went to maybe vibration or the blinking that you talked about earlier. Maybe we see something different in a different dimension of some sorts, but that's what happened to me. And I told other people that, and it's a very unique type of an experience, which set me off on a different tone, because I wouldn't even thought to ask my wife, did you see what I saw? I assume they saw it. And I suspect most people do. Anyways, that's the short story or maybe not short enough story that I wanted to share. That sort of deals with interesting takes on we're seeing something different, looking at the same thing.
I was just wondering if any of the people here have any questions or things they'd like to talk about, because we could talk about so many things, and I'd like to talk about those things or address those things that would be pertinent to the people here. So I can't read this, and yes, Laura, would you monitor, or whoever is the hall monitor? Mitzi, are you the hall monitor?
We have. I could, so just for everybody, I'm going to put on gallery here. On the bottom of your screen, we have reactions, and you can put a hand up in your box, or you can do like physically, and we can address you and have you come out and ask a question.
We do chat. We do chat.
Okay.
So they type it in chat. And if people are speaking, remember that we only have about 5 minutes per person, because we want to be respectful to the speaker and those waiting to give another.
Right. Okay.
So just choose something that you want me to address. Somebody,
Okay.
let me know.
Merle, you asked first. Let's see. You want to unmute yourself, please?
Thank you. I just want to quickly go over things like points quickly. Okay, one, Mark, with the UFO, my dad and I saw one clear as day in broad daylight in Alberta in the 60s. It came down, it hovered for about 20 minutes. There was no reflections of anything. It hovered, there was a field full of people watching it, and it was amazing. And you blinked your eyes and it vanished. Now, one more thing I had to say.
May I just address one thing to that, Merle, if you don't mind? Remember I talked about the different interpenetrating duty cycles, they're called, the blinking cycles. What I have seen in my work, my scientific technical work, often I'm in telepathic communication with the ETs, with some of them, not all of them, with only certain ones. At any rate, they're blinking at one rate of materiality, and then due to their technology, they can go into other rates. So they disappear from one. I call that saltatory progression. Saltatory means jumping progression. And this is also the way they can move across the sky, going in one direction, then all of a sudden change and seem to be going at a right angle. So they're blinking out of one dimension into another, change the direction, and then blink back in. So I just wanted to mention that, Merle, in that context.
I just wanted to tell you something quickly. I'm trying to talk fast. I was a cytotechnologist, you know what that is, for 37 years, and also studied parapsychology. And I just have to tell you about one quick thing that happened that got me started. My mother's birthday, she was in Alberta, I was here. It was the middle of the night, so of course I was thinking of her. I thought I was asleep. I had a dream that I was standing at the foot of her bed and she called me. And then next thing I knew, I woke up in the morning, I thought it's a dream. A week later, my grandmother, her mother, we're all psychic to a point. She received a letter from my mom saying, in the middle of the night on my birthday, I woke up, I swore I saw Merle standing at the foot of my bed. I knew she couldn't stay, and she disappeared. So my parapsychology professor said, you had a combination of telepathy and astral projection, astral travel at the same time, and your mother had the same telepathic thing with you at that moment.
Right.
I flipped right out.
This actually happens more than you would think. And it often happens in a crisis or in a time of really intense emotion. But sometimes it can happen with physical things too. Let me just explain. Years ago, I had a pregnancy that miscarried. Just did. It was one of those things. I wanted that baby very much, and I didn't carry it past about 3 months, and I was in a lot of pain. I had not even told my mother, who was in California, and I was in Ohio at the time, that I was pregnant. But I thought, well, I had a miscarriage and I was so ill. I was laying there on the couch. I thought, I'll call my mother. I called her and I said, Mother, I had a miscarriage. And she said, Well, now I understand why I've been having to take all that pain medicine over the last few days. And so she was feeling all this pain that I had been feeling. And this is, it happens. People communicate with each other a lot more than we realize. And the ETs, by the way, can project from one dimension into another. And that's how come they can walk through walls and such. They're interdimensional.
Okay, we have iPad 3, and then Marie and Hassan will be next, and then Trish. iPad 3, do you want to unmute
iPad
yourself?
3. Unmute yourself.
I don't even see iPad 3. Oh, I see. There he is. He, she.
Okay, so maybe they have stepped away. Maybe we'll move on to the next person.
Okay, Marie Ann put in caps. I would like to ask how you feel or see people's illnesses, physical or emotional, etc. I do remote viewing, Reiki, and spontaneous pickup on people next to me. I'd like to hear how you receive the information.
Right, absolutely. I do this all the time. I work as a medical intuitive and as an intuitive consultant. What I do is I work through setting my intention. The first thing to do, of course, is to set your intention. The intention would be essentially to go into a deep, deep, relaxed, altered state, clearing my mind of other impressions or thoughts, and then focusing on the target being the person you want to connect with or the place you want to view or whatever. And then open your heart, literally open your heart. So it's a matter of gently allowing your energy field to merge with that other energy field, just for the purposes of that particular interaction. The key point here is you get in, you merge at the undifferentiated energetic level, receive the detailed information that you need, and then retreat and don't stay connected. That is a big part of this. And then I interpret the intuitions that I get as very specific. Most of my work is done on the physical body. And I also work with the energy body and, of course, the emotions and such. But for the physical body, very, very detailed remote viewing that I call micro psi, going all the way down to the molecular level, or in some cases doing remote viewing on genetics, on genes and the chromosomes. And I'm looking at, of course, as a biologist, my training is in comparative anatomy, physiology, histology, and all these things. So I'm looking to see, does this particular structure look like what it should? For instance, I did a reading today, earlier today, and the gentleman wanted me to look at his dog. So I was looking at his dog. And what I did as I was preparing before that, I noticed something like something odd in the stomach of this animal. It was not a tumor. It was not anything. It looked like a string. It looked like something like that. So when I was talking to him about the dog, I said, it looks like something, like he's eaten something. He said, well, yes, he eats stuff. And I said, well, I think he ate a shoestring because it was not clogging the stomach, but it was in there.
Hmm.
So, and one time it was funny. this gentleman was coming to see me. In those days, I saw people in person. Now I just do everything remotely. But he was coming because, and I don't think I'd ever had a reading with him before personally. And I kept seeing this metal object in his chest. And I thought, what is this metal? It was like a disc in his chest. When he arrived, I said, I've got this some kind of metal object in his chest. And then he showed me he had a metal thing, some kind of an amulet on a chain around his neck. And I had seen it rather than, it looked like it was embedded in his chest and me. But that's what I do, very, very detailed stuff. So how do I feel or see people's illnesses? It's with the inner vision. And I was trained in this from the time I was little by my grandmother. She trained me by, she would trace drawings on my skin, on my hands, my back, just with her hands, to the point where as she touched me here, I could see it. She was developing my ability to go from one sensation to another. I call this transdermal training of inner vision. It's a technique that she learned from her mother.
Okay, next is let's see, Marie Ann Hassan. Did you want to speak or did you want me to read what you have on the chat? Okay, I'll read what's on the chat. How could someone who had no medical education learn this kind of work?
Well, I would suggest that you do get some information and education about the human body. You don't have to study it as much as I have. It's for the purpose of interpreting what you see. Now, that doesn't mean you absolutely have to, because Edgar Cayce and other people like that, they were not really well-educated individuals. However, if you want to impart the information that you have to any other scientist or to a physician, I talk to physicians all the time, you want to be able to give them some specificity. And I recommend, and those of us in NOMI, National Organization for Medical Intuition, really strongly suggest that a person have training in anatomy. And I think it's good to have a physiology training. And I also think it's good to study pathogens and parasites, because you're going to find in your work that you're going to see a particular pathogen or parasite, and you're going to want to know what it is. I see this thing, but what is it? And so you're going to need to know. And if you know about it, then you're going to be able to help a person get more information better. For instance, I was talking to an individual just last week, and he had an illness that was really caused by a certain kind of spirochete, which is a certain kind of pathogen transmitted from a tick bite. And, I was able to describe what he had and help him to understand the sequelae of this. And it's helpful. Now, if you wanted to use your remote viewing, you could use the same skills in mechanics. For instance, some of the best remote viewers that I had in the classes when I was teaching were working with mechanical things, machines, engines, that kind of thing. They were using remote viewing to interpret what they saw there, in which case it would be nice that you knew something about the engine so that you could explain the difference between what you were seeing. And you can draw it. I recommend people practice drawing too, because then if you can draw what you see, that really helps. And I think it was Mitzi. Mitzi, you said you were working with missing people. I have done that too in the past over the years. And it's helpful to be able to draw if you see a particular location. You don't have to have the whole map of the area memorized, but to have some kind of an idea of the typography can help.
Yeah, I went to the direct location where the person was murdered and where I think the person was buried.
Good, good. Good for you. That's the way to do it, Mitzi. But if you were drawing it, you would have had to say, well, I see this hill over here, I see this valley here, this, that, and the other thing. But you would never have had to actually be there. But it would be helpful to, again, get some specificity.
So Richard, I believe that's who is iPad 3. Oh, you're not iPad 3? iPad 3. Who's iPad 3? No? Okay, Richard, hold on, because
Thank
Tricia
you.
was right after iPad. Then Mary, then you, okay? Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for waiting. I'm trying to be respectful of everybody in line.
All right. So I put a question up about contact modalities, which is something I've been focusing on lately. And I'm talking about contact with non-human intelligent beings. But I wanted to say I have grandmother, mother, Irish, and all of us psychic as hell, and all up in our business, no matter how many hundreds of miles we were away. Mom calls, I hear you crying, and she's in another city, you know, that kind of thing. And also I got a degree in humanistic psych because there wasn't a parapsychology degree, and that was the closest I could get because they let me study Castaneda and all that stuff. But the contact modalities, I'm trying to interweave your concept of the blinking in and out of physical and energetic with some instruction that I and quite a few people I know been getting from mantids about vibrational planes. And the idea
That's what we're talking about, vibration.
Yeah.
The blinking is the vibration. It's the rate. I don't necessarily get a lot of my information from the mantids, but the zeta reticulans, and the grays. Now, grays are, they're a kind of cyborg. So I believe there are many types of grays that many of these species use. I see up to about 4 species groups. If I were to look at them, I would categorize them as the genus level. You know, for the Linnaean taxonomist in the group, it's more like a genus level, and then you're going to have individual species under that. So we get about 4 family groups that have come to the earth and have probably been here longer than Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
And the thing is that highly telepathic. They're all highly telepathic. So it's important to become receptive. But here's a topic that I really want to touch on, and that is grounding. One of the first things I notice about a person when I'm reading for them is how grounded they are. Very important, because if you remain grounded and you're centered, it's going to be easier for you to go into a deep enough altered state to become receptive telepathically and bring the information back. So it's extraordinarily important to be able to open up the energy field, the physical brain, to that undifferentiated mind field where the telepathy is coexistent between your brain and the telepathic source.
Mm-hmm.
So you set your intention in a way that is, I would always say, respectful. Yeah. I think it's highly important to recognize. And when I am asking, or if, especially in our scientific and technical sessions, if one of my colleagues asks me to see something that the grays don't want me to see, and of course I can see the grays in my mind's eye, they won't let me pass. And there's no getting around the end zone. They're not hostile. You just can't get past that. Because some of the things they'll let you know, and some of them that they won't. You might try muscle testing too.
We have time for 2 more questions, and then we're going to take a break.
I didn't get to ask my actual question. We went off on a tangent.
I'm sorry.
The question is contact modalities, the physical contact modalities and experiences I've had sometimes they're actually in what, we call here real.
Third
And
dimension.
sometimes there's this a teleportation, but it's their volition sometimes. I've also uploaded into another body, not my own. And I'm wondering if that slipping in between these energy fields and into the other reality is how this is being done, or if it's tech. I'm kind of confused about that because I'd like to be able to do it more intentionally for myself and not just be someone getting dragged here and there.
They are slipping between the dimensions, and you can control that volitionally. Okay, so yes, it is, and it's not that one is real and the other isn't. They're all real. Okay.
Okay, Mary, can you?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Ask.
I'm finding this concept. This is the first time I've joined the group, and I don't think it was a coincidence. The day I found out about it was the day that I was seeking answers. So it's good to hear about these different modalities and the blinking or slipping in and out. When I was about 10, I think was my first contact with UFO. I think they've been on me off and on over the years, but in the last few years, I was seeing star maps on the ceiling of my dressing room. Happened for about 2 or 3 years straight. Not every night, but most nights. And it was quite remarkable, very bright. I could see the different constellations. Some nights it would change to different constellations. My husband would see it too. Then sometimes it would go to grid patterns that were abstract. Is this a blinking between the different modalities, or is something trying to communicate with me?
Oh, I think they're trying to communicate with you. And I get the sense that that pattern is being not just superimposed on your physical brain, but obviously it's something that your husband is seeing also. And two people don't usually have the same, hallucination. So it's no hallucination.
Yeah.
You are actually seeing it. It's being projected. Absolutely. So I feel that they've been in contact with you all your life. And so it's not a harmful thing. You, by the way, and everyone here should know, you can stop any contact that you find to be unpleasant. You can prevent any that you find to be intrusive. It's a matter of just saying, hey, I'm not doing this. I'm not participating in this. Stop it. However, as myself, when a little girl running outside and looking up at the stars, say, here I am, take me. You can't always get taken when you want. So, but you can gradually work into what is in alignment with your high self and your soul's path, if you so choose. But there are some individuals who do get abducted against their will. Absolutely.
I have contacted, it's interesting how it all played out with people that are very psychic and deal with aliens, so to speak. I prefer to call them star people. The other thing is I live on extremely powerful land. Apparently I have an incredible portal on my land. I've got the Aboriginals here. I've been told by these psychics that these ETs, whatever you want to call them, have a purpose for me, and to ask them what it is. Well, for 5 years, I keep asking and I hear nothing. And I'm not sure. I think I'm fairly grounded. I meditate, do things. But I've also been told that I block.
And?
How do I unblock? I'd like to know what it is they're trying to tell me.
And I can't tell you at this point. However, I do feel it's important. And go ahead, Mitzi, you say what you want to say.
I think that you were saying that you weren't going to be doing readings and stuff for people.
That's right, I'm not.
So Mary,
I'm not asking for reading. I'm just wondering, what methods one uses to unblock.
I believe that you are doing what you need to do. It's just sometimes it's not our timetable, it's somebody else's timetable. And
okay.
we can't always expect it to be on our timetable.
Okay,
Okay, we have one more speaker
Thank you.
before break. We have one more speaker before break. That was Richard. Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Um,
Were you also iPad 3?
I think I must be, yeah.
Okay. you
Although I'm
had-
on an iPhone, so that's why I didn't respond.
Okay. Sorry about interrupting. You asked your question and then we're gonna take a 5-minute break.
Okay. I retired a while back and people are asking me, what I meet people say, what are you doing for the rest of your life? Well, I've watched about 30 NDE experiences on YouTube, and seems like they quite often meet what I call the unlimited loving presence, unconditional loving presence. And many times it's so powerful. People say you've never been loved like this. They might start crying or whatnot. And then they often have the life at the same time, and the loving being, and they see how they've treated people, and the loving being says, how have you loved people like I'm loving you? And many times the loving being will also say, what have you done with what you were brought in with to help others or to love others? And I was just wondering if Kay, with all the different philosophies she's read and the scope of her exposure out there and meeting people, would you concur that that's a core of why we're here? Or would you add something to that? And then I have a quick follow-up.
Oh, the unconditional love, of course. I remember I said there's an overriding organizational principle. And I feel that overriding organizational principle is ultimately not a person, not a thing, but it is something bigger than our mind can conceive of. And when I connect with it, it's pure love, unconditional love, more than I can envision. So I feel our primary purpose is to align ourselves as much as possible with unconditional love. That's why my ministry since 1982 has been one of prayer. And that's it. Opening up to unconditional love and prayer.
So I've always, when I listen to these experiences, I've always imagined this loving being as,
I can't hear him.
Yeah, you're breaking up, Richard,
okay, let me try again. Is that any better?
Better.
so far.
Test 1, 2. Okay. The follow-up is I also read some abduction books, and then I started wondering, because it seemed like some of the star people were able to cause abductees to go through a life experience. And so then I wondered if this loving being is more of a godlike creature or just an advanced alien species.
No, I don't think we're talking about a species or a creature. We are talking about something that is not embodied, but we are the embodiment of it. It's totally universal. So this is not an ET or anything like that. They are creatures just like you and I are creatures. They're a species. They just happen to be able to go from one dimension to another. This is beyond manifestation. And those religions that believe that you should never show the face of God, I strongly agree with. It's not something to be drawn or, given a personification. It's way beyond that.
Thank you.
So welcome back, everyone. We're one of the things that we're wanting to touch on earlier today. We're talking with some people about some issues of ETs. So, Kay, you've had, I guess, I suspect clients, and I'm not obviously asking for client names or information. Can you provide the kind of feedback or messaging ETs are coming to their clients with these days? Is there a consistent type of message? Is it varied depending on the person? Is it earth related, spiritual related, consciousness related?
I am not usually talking to individuals about the messages they have received.
Yes.
I'm more looking at their physical bodies.
Okay.
I am looking at alterations that have occurred because often people talk to me because they're having some kind of an issue. So I'm sure I'm not seeing those individuals who have no issues at all with what has been happening.
Right.
And so I'm not, I can't answer that question. Someone else would have to answer that. I'm more looking at, there's a lot of trauma in those people that I have seen, a lot of levels of different types of trauma, some consciously remembered, some not remembered. And I don't do hypnotic regression, nor do I suggest it because it might kindle, and sometimes it might produce false memories. But I'm just looking at the physiology of the people.
Now, people who have been taken and repaired on ships. This is another thing I've had people. Have you had those kind of discussions as well? Okay, we're
not necessarily, if they're repaired, they're not necessarily seeking out the services of someone such as myself. However, I've talked to Travis Walton.
Yes.
And of course others. You know, I and about 35 or 40 other people had lunch with him one time. Had to pay to have lunch with him. He's a dear person. But people who are feeling great are not necessarily going to come to a medical intuitive. Do you understand? Yes. The people who come to seek out my services often have mystery illnesses. And I love that because I don't love that they have them, but that's the kind of thing I'd love to look at, because sometimes it's more than one thing happening or something that's atypical, you know. They might have chronic illnesses that have been going on for years and years and years, and they've seen to gazillions of doctors and nobody can help. So they finally come to someone such as myself. What's going on, kind of thing. Not that I'm a physician, but I can say, well, this is kind of the root cause, and you need to seek this or that or the other type of physician or healer or helper. And so it's things of unusual nature. Sometimes couples who are having difficulty conceiving would come to someone such as myself because the physicians have said, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. Why is this happening? All kinds of different things like that.
Interesting. And that's an area where you can actually explore and say, like on that type of an issue, they can't bear children at this point. Is that something you can verify or say, try this, try that? Is that the kind of
I'm not a physician, so I'm not talking about medications. If there was a medication they could take, they would have found it with some doctor, and most of them have tried all kinds of stuff. Often it is a more metaphysical thing. It could very well be that there is no soul that wishes to come in. You know, we think that a pregnancy is two people, but it's more than that. It's the mother and the father and the child. So it takes three to tango in that sense, at least three. Sometimes they're more. And so it's a situation where there just might not be an offspring that wants to come into that situation.
Understood. Okay. Any other, there's a question from Veronica that we should go to.
Veronica?
Yeah, hi. Actually, that's very interesting what you're saying. I don't know if you've come across anybody with the optic nerve. I actually have optic nerve damage. I'm visually impaired. I wasn't supposed to lose my sight, or as much as I did. I'm an experiencer, and I would say I had a visitation when I was 4. And I was experiencing things before then, seeing things. And then after the fact, I remembered sometime later when I was 5, I think I got my sight back for just a couple minutes in the car on the way to Toronto, but then I lost it again. But I don't know if it was just because of a lot of belief. I really wanted it badly, but I had clear vision up until then. I had a brain tumor with a cyst.
Something like that, Veronica, is a personal reading. I really would not like to get into that right here. But there are unique circumstances in your situation. And it would be something that I would explore with someone such as yourself in a private session. We go into a great depth and down to the cellular level in some cases, but also past lives. And past lives, I personally feel, are a reality. And you may agree with me or not. It's up to you. Uh, but they often have an influence on the present situation and all kinds of
Mm.
things at the level of the soul. So I wouldn't be able to give you a generalized answer to that, Virginia, Veronica. That would be more of a personal thing.
Yeah, no, totally. And but yeah, I remember reading that the optic nerve was something about the near-death experiences that people had. Somehow was sometimes a little bit connected to that. I remember reading, just wanted to say that out of interest. But anyway, that
I
was it.
don't know of any such citation.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. So we have Jess typed in a question. Okay, what are your thoughts on ETs being of human race from the future, time traveling
Oh,
back
well.
to now?
Okay, if not necessarily the ETs, there are humans from the future who do visit the present, and they're humans. They are, you know, at least they would match us. You know, we would identify them as humans. Absolutely.
So
So
I'm wondering if
time is something which has been um, in the future. We will learn to manipulate a great deal more than we do with fields that are what are called interdigitating. And I can't go too much into the physics of that at this point, but interdigitating fields can affect materiality. And therefore, time travel is a possibility. And some of such as the individuals that arrived in the Randall-May forest, I feel were time travelers. And that would account for the inscription on the craft, which was really giving the date.
Yeah,
Kate,
that's who our guest was last month.
Oh, really? From Randall-May? Oh, how wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what
So,
I feel they were time travelers, for sure.
okay, I think some people think that the Greys are our future. So what do you think about that? Is that our
Oh,
future?
and I don't believe so. I believe the Greys are, they're not complete independent organisms. They don't have a complete digestive tract. um, they do not reproduce. However, they are partially machine and partially organic. So then in those cultures that have the grays, and there's several species that have their versions of the grays, um, these are what we would call a merger of machine and DNA. And in the future, we will have such things. Absolutely. But they're not independent. In fact, the grays, some of them, especially the zetas, zeta reticulans and such, will be called the bee people in about 1,000 years from now. Our race will call them the BEE, like like honeybees, because they're a syncytium. That is, the thoughts of one are the thoughts of all. They're not individual personalities. They're probes. They're probes.
Thank you. Thank you. So another question from Mary. Why do you think that there are far more sightings of UFOs and why are they now being more obvious to the public?
Well, first of all, people know that they can report them. The stigma about reporting them is not as much. Here in Arizona, there are more reports of UFOs in California and Arizona because the weather. People are out more and watching. I also feel there's greater activity now, and it has been greater activity probably since the World War II. But there's just a lot of accelerated activity, but people are more willing to talk about it. And we have organizations like MUFON and others that where you can report them. But it's a combination of there are more of them and more people looking and watching and willing to report them. So both things are happening.
Well, I also look at back in time, like my people, the Sami people of Finland, we interacted with the what we call the star people. So that was common for us. That is what we always talk about. That's part of our history. And you read about it in hieroglyphics or pictures that they show from ancient times.
Mhm.
So I wonder, was it really not as prevalent, or is it because we have media that makes it more
Well,
prevalent?
that's true. You hear more about the sightings, but the ancient people of Ireland and the Celtic people, very, very much in touch. And of course, the wee folk. And I think in many cases, the wee folk are probably um, projections of grays and such. But everybody sees what their culture allows them to see.
Interesting. Yeah. Mitzi, you're
I don't
muted.
see any other questions. Does anybody want to put up their hand, or Mark, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I have some other issues that I'd like to actually advance as well. If somebody doesn't have any questions, because I don't mind getting the questions out of the way as well. So there are no more other questions. That's so we talk about using your gifts and your skills to as a medical intuitive, but for the people in on this call and people watching the video in the future, um, what about for higher guidance, like for using refining your own gifts? So everyone has these gifts, as I understand it. Would you agree with that?
To I think to a great extent. I think that one can refine the gifts, but at first you have to believe in them. It very much like we were talking about sports. If you came from a family where you were told there was no such thing as baseball, that somehow it was a sinful for you to go out and play basketball or football or volleyball, then not many people would engage in those sports because they would feel that it was not something they were supposed to do. So when tiny children in our culture and most of the outer cultures, not in my family of origin or maybe in Tish's family or some of the others, uh, talk about their dreams or talk about the ghosts that they see or the lights they see in the sky or such, if their family says, "Oh, hush up, that's just your imagination, stop doing this," they're not they're not going to open to it, and they could later on, of course. So it's yes, one has certain abilities, and it's important to recognize it's perfectly natural to use them and to expand them and practice. So it's practice, practice, practice. Makes
Right.
perfect with feedback, you know.
Hey, did you have these skills? Did you recognize it when you were young that you had them?
Oh,
Or was it,
yes.
yeah, you knew
From the
when,
time I was knee high to a grasshopper, so to speak,
yeah,
because my grandmother reinforced this for me. People would come over and have grandmother find objects for them. She never took money for what, because she didn't need it. She had plenty of money. Um, but we talked about these things, and then I can remember her taking me. We'd go back and get my grandfather, and um, every day. And I remember going to malls and places like that, and grandmother telling me about the people who were going to come around the corner. Like, here's this person, they're going to come around the corner. This is what she's going to look like, or this is what he's going to look like. This is what they're doing in their life. This is what they're going to want. Now you tell me about the next one that's going to come around the corner. This kind of thing. It's games that we played
ah,
and things. I I tried a lot of things that didn't work. Like I tried a lot of out of body experiences when I was in grade school. It didn't work. I couldn't do it. It's a good thing. Um, my friends used to play with the Ouija board. I would put my hand on the Ouija board. It would just go flying away. I could never do it. The planchette would fly off the the thing. I couldn't do it. And now I know why. It wasn't necessarily for me to do. Um, so it's it's a matter of culture and practice, and then having a purpose. Edgar Casey often would be contacted by people who wanted to have this skill or that skill. They wanted to see the aura. They wanted to do healings. And his question perennially would be, why? Why do you want that? What is your purpose? Because once a person begins along this pathway and opens up to their skills, it does take time, it takes commitment, and it's a joyful thing, but it's done with a higher purpose. And I think if you talk to anybody on this call who is developing their skills and using them, you will find that either they want to be a healer, or they want to help people, or they want to be creative, maybe an artist, in some way, you know, make the world a better place. And this is what Edgar Casey would say. Yes, if this is your purpose, then you're going to unfold at the level of the soul to these abilities. In other um, in other belief systems, they're called the sittvas, and it's believed that in the East Indian um, belief system, that is when opened up the chakras, which are these spiritual centers, there would be certain abilities that would be associated with them. And in the Bible is called the gifts of the Spirit in Corinthians, and where it's described the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So again, first it has to do with the practice, learning to meditate, learning to be grounded, learning to be centered, and then to have a purpose for it. And then your unfoldment will follow as it needs to. That's why I don't necessarily recommend the use of psychedelic drugs or the use of any other kind of illicit drugs, etc., to open up necessarily to some of these experiences just as a lark, or just to, gosh, I want to see the aura just because I want to see the aura kind of thing. When I first started seeing the aura in color, um, it was during my third pregnancy. And before I was in the middle of the pregnancy, I had a toddler and everything, and my hands were full with stuff. And I had a couple of dreams in which it said, after the birth of your child, you're going to see the aura. We're going to showing you how to see the aura. I thought, okay, whatever. Let's just get through this pregnancy first. Let's just get first things first. And then I began to see lights all around people more and more and more. And I realized that, you know, my work was really expanding in that manner.
What about, I mean, we've heard someone talk about it earlier, and I've talked with 15 people that have had near-death experiences, which I find fascinating. What's your take on what that, you know, I've heard scientists say many different things, but what would be your take on that?
Well, I can tell you, I have never had a near-death experience. However, I did a reading. Remember, I alluded to the fact I had those readings from my physician with the numbers?
Yes.
Well, one of the cases, I was given a number. I couldn't internally see any person. I just saw this brilliant white light, and I was told she's in remission. She is not ill. We are preparing a party for her. We are celebrating. So I said that, and they wrote it down. They sent it to the doctor, and he graded it wrong. He said, no, that's wrong, 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 wrong. And then I heard from him a few days later. He said, what was the time you did that? I'm like, oh, that they had the exact time. Well, she had just died of ovarian cancer, and nobody knew that she had just died. So I saw the light. So I have to tell you, as a biologist, if I saw the light, it wasn't because I was hypoxic, that my brain was missing oxygen. It wasn't anything to do with the physiology of my brain. I, as a psychic, was tapping into something that was really happening. This woman died of ovarian cancer. She was in remission, and they were preparing a party for her.
Wow. That's absolutely remarkable. And when I start thinking of all the people who try to explain out what that NDE was, they had a electrical charge in their brain and they still hadn't passed away. And
I don't believe a word of it because I
right.
saw it myself.
Yeah. I mean, that you're just defeated that whole concept there with that statement alone. I mean, they're celebrating in the afterlife for her passing and being greeted by many, which I find, that's why I spent time with near-death experiencers. It's a wonderful, peaceful place, like meditating to me when I talk to these people about going to a place that they think there's such love and caring, and it's overwhelming the joy they feel there. Most of them don't want to come back. Pretty fascinating place.
Well, I'll tell you, that took away my fear of death right there because I know what I saw. People don't
Yeah.
have to believe me, but I know what I saw. And it's all down in the transcripts. We have the date and everything all transcribed and sworn to by the scientists who were there in the room with me and by the
Yeah.
doctor who graded it wrong.
Pretty amazing when you take into account, like all 15 people I've talked to have said exactly the same thing. They don't fear death at all.
No.
It's
No
just
fear.
you know what, is there any way that we could have people, how many people on here have had a near-death experience that are actually a part of our group tonight? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the rest of them don't have a picture or.
Well, Tish says she said 2 of them.
Wow. Well, that's really to the UFO community. There's I can't remember, it was called PACE or something, or Free, I think it was. And they did a survey of people who had been abducted, and they went through a number of different things, and a lot of them had a near-death experience as a part of their experience. So also a connection to the other side or the other dimension, or so let's maybe take a step back to that. So passing to another dimension, is this a passing to another dimension? Is this, what is that from what you understand, at least?
Well,
Kate?
what I have watched is I have watched the energy field of individuals who were dying. And essentially, it's a withdrawal of the energy's body from the actual physical body. So it's not going necessarily to a different dimension per se, but the consciousness. See, you and I have a physical brain. We also have this mind field, which you can extend anywhere that you wish. And that's just as physical as any other part of you, and it's in the same dimension. So we don't have to hypothesize that a person goes to another dimension when they die, because there was such a thing as what the ancient Egyptians called the Ka or the Ba. We would call it the ghost, um, the astral body, and that can remain for a period of time. There can be energies that are retained by the objects of an individual, like Mitzi. She was able to go to the place where that person was murdered and was able to see and hear and read that event. Those events get imprinted into the actual materiality of the world around us. And if you go to a hospital, even though it's beautifully clean and everything else physically, it can have a lot of astral gunk in it. It can have a lot of ghosts walking around. My son, who's very clairvoyant, and I were at a hospital one time visiting a person, and he looked down the hall. He said, "Oh, Mom, look at that! There's that person who just walked through that wall," and it was a ghost that he had just seen just walking through. Um, it is not necessarily people who are dead, just people who are out of body that are looking for their their bodies. So this world is much bigger than you and I are, or ordinarily meant to asked about or talked about.
Hey, what do you think this reality is? Can you just, what have you arrived at from all the things that you've seen, heard, experienced?
I'm in total awe of it because I cannot wrap my mind around it. It is bigger than I can conceive, and I am in exceptional awe, and it's a wondrous, wondrous experience. I feel so happy to be able to experience it because it's magnificent. It's awe-inspiring. It's
Yeah,
more than we can define, beyond definition.
yeah. Quite
So we
amazing.
have some questions. I don't know if we want to interrupt.
Go right ahead, Mitzi.
Okay. So Elaine asked, please talk about your art.
Oh, art is something which I've always enjoyed dabbling in, and as an illustrator, but even before then, when I was a young girl, I began to learn about oil paints. My best friend, my best girlfriend, was in high school when I was in grade school, and so she would come home from school and teach me how to paint in oils. And so, of course, I painted a past life memory of myself as I saw myself in a lifetime in Egypt. But it didn't look like with the Egyptian headdress or, you know, one would expect, with all of that. It just looked like this particular painting of this person. It was a man, and he didn't have a major headdress or anything. I kept that painting for years. And then when I was doing my postdoc in Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio, we were right there with the Cleveland Institute of Art. And often I'd be able to go over and look at the Art Institute. And I found an Egyptian wing, and there were these paintings. They were done in crayon of the time, a wax type of material on linen, and there was a painting like what I had painted, that not the exact one, but that epoch. And so it was like, wow, yeah, that's what I was painting. I believe, in my case, being an artist is something you can't stop being. It just comes up from so I've done all kinds of stuff, painted in different things, and I've done crochet and knitting and spinning. I love to spin. First time I decided to spin it with my spinning wheel, I knew I'd done it many times before. I love to spin. Um, you know, and now I'm doing mono prints on a jelly plate. Maybe some of you guys have used the gel plate where you can take prints off of a gel plate and mono prints and pen and inks and stuff. In between readings, I don't get to do much because I have so many readings nowadays. But I've done
Okay.
portraits and all kinds of stuff. Yes, Mitzi.
I want to pause just a second and ask Carol. She had her hand up at the very end, and I don't know if she wanted to ask the question or if she wanted to be included with near-death experiences. So I didn't want to offend her or you. I'm asking Carol.
Thank you, Mixie. That's very observant of you. Actually, it's the combined.
Okay.
Kay, you're absolutely excellent, my dear. All right, so I had a near-death experience. I had pneumonia, and I was just above the earth. I don't remember coming out of my body. I don't remember looking back at my physical body in the bed. I don't remember any lights or tunnels, but I was just above the earth. The earth was like a blue marble, and I was in some kind of a spiritual body. And I turned, and there was this being who was in silhouette. The light behind it was blue-white, like a welder's torch. Our sun was yellow compared to that light. It had a long robe, long and hood, long hair, and the love that was coming from it, the love that it had for humanity, was like divine love. It was unconditional love. And I asked, it was neither male nor female, but it wasn't cold. It was full of love. And I said, do you know what's going on down there on planet Earth? And I went to speak and give my life as an example, and it saw into my heart. There was telepathy. And I cried because there was perfect understanding, because so often we get misinterpreted in this world because of our language. And And then I was told to let go of everything on earth, the air, the fire, the water, the plants, and the animals. And I thought I would never see them again. So finally I let go, and the more I let go, the more this love went right through every cell of this body that I had. And I was in a state of ecstasy. It was exquisite, it was euphoric, it was rapture. And then even the love that I had, my mother was still alive in London, England at the time. And even the love I had for my mother, I had to let go of that as well. So the being was behind me at that point, reassuring me. I was like a child with a teddy bear, you know, I'd sort of hang on and let go and hang on and let go. So finally I let go, and then I wasn't me anymore. I was it. It was like I was God or the creator or whoever, however one conceives of, you know, of something higher than ourselves. And then I realized it was terrifying. And in the beginning, it was terrifying. Like it was like God's got no one to go to. We've always got family, or we've got a hospital to go to, or there's a neighbor or somebody to go to. Anyway, and then I realized I wasn't Carol Stacey anymore. I was consciousness in a body. And everything is consciousness at different frequencies and vibrations. And then I was told there was these highly evolved beings, and they said, your time is not up yet. You're not ready to die, and you have to go back and give out. I didn't want to come back. And so now I'm using Zoom, and I teach remote viewing, transcending levels of consciousness. I'm following Sir Dr. David R. Hawkins, with power versus force, or transcending levels of consciousness from the negative to the positive. The history of UFOs, and it's not about UFOs and extraterrestrials, because our own Grant Cameron, he said, as I say, it's about, they want us to go up in consciousness, stop warring, stop destroying the planet. So I came back and I tried that. I tried that night to get back into it. Even the next night, I want to get back into it. Anyway, so now, Kay, you're right. I have no, and Mark, you're right, that I have no fear of death, like so many, you know, I'm not the only one, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a combination of, you know, thank you, Mitzi, again, for noticing that, yeah. So is that, Kay, is that what we need to do on this planet? We need to go up, you know, stop the negativity thinking and the negative thinking, and, you know,
we just have to realize the power of our thoughts and realize that we are co-creators. And there are all of us, we're all one at the level of pure consciousness. We are one. And this is, I don't believe the planet's going to be destroyed. I believe there are others in other dimensions that will not allow that to happen. However, there is a lot of suffering. And therefore, it's important for us to do our part, our bit at expanding our consciousness. And thank you, Carol, for sharing your beautiful story and for continuing to teach.
Thank you. And you too, Kay, right? So with all my groups, they're all saying the same thing, right? They're all on Zoom, except for one. And now we're finally getting together. I'm following the knowledge book right now. So we actually do get together, you know, like we did before COVID. So thank you so much, Kay. Excellent.
Good. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Carol.
Same
We have
here.
one more question. Let's see. People keep typing in stuff that are not questions, and it's hard for me to find it. I believe it was
Somebody says, how does one differentiate near death
Yes,
from vivid
that's
dreams?
what I'm looking for.
This is rather interesting because there are such things as lucid dreams, dreams where you are awake while you're asleep and you can actually do whatever you'd like to do. Often people will question what they see in remote viewing, or they'll question it if they're having a dream and they see something. Is this Is this really a remote viewing in the dream, or is it just a made up something? So here's what you can do that's practical. If you have consciousness enough that you can direct what you're doing, you can look around you and see if you can read something. Read it and then turn away in the dream. Come back and read it again and turn away. Do this a couple of times. If it does not change, it's real. If it is a dream, it'll change. So you can actually measure and see for yourself whether you're having an out of body experience, whether you're having a lucid dream, or whether you're having a very vivid dream.
Thank you. Kay, did you want to get back to the art? Sorry,
Oh,
friend.
the art. Yes. I feel that everyone has the potential for being creative. And yet in our culture, very much as with the side of us that's intuitive, or the side that might see into other dimensions, there is a tendency for people to feel they're judged by this. They don't want to put forth whatever it is they might want to create, because they're for fear of being judged. And I say, gosh, that's a shame, because
Yeah.
if you can awaken to the playful side of your consciousness and try this or that or the other. So know you have my permission to try something, even if it's just a little kit of something. Let's say you want to try cross stitching. You have my permission to do one little kit of cross stitching and maybe not even finish it if you don't like it, and throw it away. You don't have to be perfect at it, but I want you to try. It's the same is true with athletics. You can try some aspect of it, or singing, or anything where you are expressing yourself and bringing joy into your life. And so the purpose of art, I think, is to let those emotions that might get caught into your body up and out. And great art has the most deep emotions embedded in it. And again, we get into the psychic quality that great art, or all art actually, has the energy, carries the energy of the particular artist. And perhaps you've gone to a museum and actually seen a real first, the actual original painting by some great artist, and you notice the energy from it as opposed to a reproduction in a book or something, which might be beautiful, have great composition and great color, but it doesn't have that energy. It's because the energy is imbued into that.
Thank you.
Mark, did you have some more questions? And you had a line of questions to guide.
On healthy choices and the idea of your being wellness, and this is something you specialize in a general sense, and as much as you can, sort of within the time we have, sort of talk a bit through the types of things that we should be more cognizant of, because obviously my day is just something comes in front of me, I eat it and I move on to the next thing, sometimes fast. So
Okay.
give us some ideas on what you'd be sort of looking to focus people on.
If there's one thing that a person can do that will ensure that they handle the challenges, both physical, emotional, and every other, to the top of their ability, is to stay grounded, to get grounded and to stay grounded. What I mean by grounding is what the British call earthing. It literally means that at some point in your day, you will get in contact with the actual earth, the physical earth. It's electromagnetic contact. If you live in Phoenix, Arizona, then you are blessed with a beautiful winter where you can go out and put your bare feet on the ground just about any time. Maybe not in the middle of summer, but all winter. You in Canada, you might have a lot of snow, or somewhere else where there's ice and snow, but you could earth or ground through a potted plant or through some other thing which is grounded. There are earthing beds. There are all kinds of things that you can use, but that's one of the best things you can do. What does it do? It improves the immune system. It helps to reduce inflammation in the body. It can help with many, many of the physiological processes in the body. And therefore, I strongly recommend that people pay attention to the grounding. And one of the first things I do in my readings as a medical intuitive is look to see if the person's first chakra, especially, is grounded. And then we can talk about specifically for that person what they might do. Sometimes it's sound therapy where they are listening to like Tibetan bowls or to the tuning forks or chimes. For some people, it's humming or chanting. For some people, it's singing, drumming. For other people, it might be dancing. For some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's Reiki. It's specific to the individual. But staying grounded is one of the best things you can do for yourself. And it's something you can do every day. And it doesn't really cost anything just to go put your feet on the ground.
Yes, I've heard people do that. That's a fantastic thing, very similar to meditation, where they get into very neutral spots. They're able to get their brain inactive. And in my case, we have a 2-hour meditation in Winnipeg on Thursday nights, and it's like having an 8-hour sleep when I come out of a meditation.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful place.
But I recommend going into meditation, taking it by steps, to not try at first a 2-hour meditation. You would work up to that. I feel that it's more important to do a 5-minute meditation or 10-minute meditation and to do it well because otherwise it's restful perhaps, but not quite the same. And it's a matter of biofeedback training. So anything having to do with mindfulness and biofeedback training is excellent. And this then opens up to the deeper consciousness and deeper conscious awareness that can then be brought to the surface for you for guidance in your own life. For instance, learning to dowse, muscle test for yourself is something that's really important. Can be as simple as this, where you take one hand like this and you do the other and you try to separate them like that. I've disappeared from this, but you try to separate them. And essentially, you can use a pendulum or something, especially if you live in Sedona. Nobody's going to pay attention if you live in Sedona if you whip out your pendulum in the Fry's food store. But most places they're going to think you're weird. But if you can muscle test and douse for yourself, and should I have this? Should I have that? Should I be eating this? Should I be? And the more you use it, the more you practice. It's practice, practice, practice with feedback. You're going to get more and more. And actually, for the UFOs as well, you can actually connect with your friends in other dimensions through your own dowsing.
So what about, I was in Scottsdale a couple of weeks ago, or I guess about a month ago. You and I had some lunch with your husband and enjoyed that very much. But I went and tried med beds. They have a place in Scottsdale and Shea. There's a place that I went to that uses a vibration and a screen that rotates imagery. Have you ever heard of these type of things?
No.
There's no sense in going into it.
No, I haven't heard of it, but you can find all kinds of things in Scottsdale and the surrounds.
That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. Medical devices. There used to be the Rife machine. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, of course I have, but
Yeah.
I don't want to get into it at this
I see.
point. Yeah, but of course I have. And all kinds of psychometric things. It's fun to practice. People were talking about psychokinesis a little bit, and you can practice moving things with your mind. Just recognize you got to keep it playful. This is in my opinion, as it is truly with all practice with telepathy and all these other things. Be playful at it. Don't do it for long periods of time. You don't want to get yourself overly tired. The Zener cards, where you would look at the different, symbols and everything. you can burn out on those. I have done it, believe me, as a child. So it's got to be playful. It's got to be like a game. It has to be something that is lighthearted, because manifestation is not a like, ooh, let's make it happen. Manifestation is lightly thinking about something and just knowing it as much as you know the sun's going to come up tomorrow. You know that's going to happen. It's going to be. And this goes then from, and here I go into a concept which may be beyond our discussion tonight, but the idea that we go from the conscious mind to the subconscious to the high self. This is the Father, Mother, God within. These are the precepts of Huna, the ancient philosophy called Huna. And if we want to essentially connect with this manifestation process to the subconscious, it can't be a matter of super trying. It has to be light, playful, and enjoyable. And that's another reason for art. Art helps us to get out of ourselves and play. Otherwise, it's not art, it's work.
Thank you, Kay. We have a few more minutes, Mark. We're going to start winding down.
Yeah, is there anyone else that wants to ask a question of Kay prior? We got 10 minutes left here. So is there someone there that, Rolf, if you'd like to unmute yourself?
So there's a work phone. I believe that
Yes.
was Richard.
So something playful to the end that started with your beginning. You mentioned the lemon.
Yes.
Back home, sometimes on Sundays, the band would play in the city square, and some of us Lausbuben, we had a lemon in our pocket, moved to the front and pretended to bite into the lemon, which gave the wind instrument problems.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. That's great.
You imposed your will upon them.
The power of suggestion.
Yes. Yeah.
So one of the things I would leave you with is listen to your children, listen to the younger people that you are around. Pay attention to what they say, their observations of the world, and don't cut off their imagination, but just listen. And you don't have to encourage them to be fanciful when maybe fancy is not appropriate, but honoring and listening respectfully to youngsters, even toddlers, because you don't know who they will be when they grow up.
Beautiful.
Well,
Well,
we had one more question and then we have to wrap it up.
okay.
I believe it was Richard. Were you the one that wanted the roundabout question?
Thank you. I just, the other thing that really struck me tonight is your comments on the blinking. I used to, 20 years ago, I played computer games, and if you were, they're 3D environments and you needed to get the powerful video card because then you could up your refresh rate. And the refresh rate is how quickly your computer screen is blinking on and off, which you're completely unaware of. And the faster it blinked, the more realistic it was. And of course, we all know movie screens blink on and off. So all of our human created simulations are based on blinking. And there's a physicist named Thomas Campbell who writes about his theory of everything, THO. So he calls it My Big Toe. And his books are about how our experience is a very sophisticated simulation. And with all the computer games, the physics of simulation have been studying and have been evolving. And so he makes the case that we're in a simulation. And I sort of lost my, the kicker for me was, which I've always wondered as a kid, why is the speed of light the cap of how fast things can travel?
But it isn't.
Seems,
It isn't.
well, I'll be quiet after this comment. He says it's because the simulation we're in, any simulation, depending on how fast it's blinking, things can only, you can't move fast. You cannot experience something if it's moving faster than a certain amount, because the blinking can't keep up with the speed. And so the blinking thing, I thought, just triggered my memory of all this.
No, there is such a thing as warp drive. And, Star Trek got it pretty right, Roddenberry did, because essentially that etheric template can be distorted. And there is a basic separation of the individual bits of matter that I call gravitons. I call that basic unit 1, when the etheric template is not disturbed. However, when we bring in matter, antimatter, as I have studied also in my work, it puckers and pulls in the etheric template, therefore shortening the space between the gravitons. And essentially, we can cause warp drive to happen and actually go beyond the speed of light. So warp drive is not impossible. It just has to do with matter, antimatter. And I pretty much know how to do that too, but it's beyond the scope of talking about it tonight.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Kay. We're gonna take a couple minutes for Mark to close and to Kay to give us any final things she wants to say.
Yep. I guess, again, out of all our numerous calls and interviews and get-togethers, essentially, okay, we told you earlier, we've created a community here of people that have looking to explore, push their mind to a different place, learn different things, grow. And you're a big part of this. We really appreciate you coming here tonight and sharing what you have. And I asked the people in the call here to go to the chat at the very top, and you can copy and paste her website where you can get her book. And your book is called, Kay?
Well, there's several books, but the one that I'm talking about is Inner Visions of Matter and Subtle Energy. And that you can have your local bookstore order through New Leaf distributors, or you can contact me personally. I don't recommend necessarily going to Amazon for various reasons,
Right.
but you can contact me, but I suggest just asking your local bookstore to carry it to New Leaf distributors. Also, I have
Right.
Inner Visions of Matter and Subtle, well, besides that, books on healing and creativity, and other books that I have written over the years. It's great to be here, and also I do personal readings, and you can reach me through my website, and there you
I highly
can
recommend them, Kay. I mean, it's worth the time and effort. I mean, you're a gifted individual. I must say that I enjoyed every minute when we were together, and also the episode I had when I had you
Thank you.
do a reading for me. So it was great. But we recognize you have limited time, and you make your living by using your time. So I very much appreciate you come, and I know we all appreciate you for the time that you've put in and the knowledge you've shared with us, making us better, making us more inquisitive to things that we maybe need to spend more time with and understand. And I know I could speak for everyone here that we appreciate everything that you've done tonight and will continue to do. And I also want to thank my group that's behind us, but Mitzi and Laura and Betty do a great job. And I'd like to leave the last word to you, Kay. This was your interview, and we appreciate it, but I'd love you to have the last few words.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mark and Mitzi, and everyone who is involved, this Laura, and all of the people here. It's really been delightful to connect with you. Just remember that there's more to the universe, more to the world than what you may have been taught. Keep your mind open. Recognize that all of these things we're talking about are normal. They're not woo-woo. They're not paranormal. But above all else, It's not about what we do, it's about who we are. That's important. So, you know, the meaning of life is not so much about what you accomplish, the books you write, and the prizes that you win. Those are nice, but they, you know, they're not really what matters. It's who you are while you're doing no matter what you do. And that is what it's all about, to maintain that consciousness of caring and the consciousness of love and optimism. It's as if we've read the last page of the book and we know the story's going to turn out all right. We've got to keep remembering that.